Hey guys, Mike back with the F29 formula, the 88 F29 formula. I'm getting all tongue-tied today. Anyway, so last video I made, I was taking apart the anchor windlass, and I got all the parts in to put it back together, but when I flipped the motor housing over, it came with two gaskets. A small one, and you can see that, a very small gasket, and a big one. Well, the small one goes around the motor right here, this part, and the bigger one goes around the perimeter of the motor. And when I flipped the housing over, there was a lot of salt that had corroded one side of it, and I'm going to stop for a second. I'm going to point to it, and I'm going to JB weld it so you can see what I'm doing with that. Okay, so let me zoom in on that, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Let's see if you can see that. What, wrong way? Right there, you see that corrosion? Anyway, I decided that it's best to hold off putting it together while I JB weld that. So I'm going to stop the video now. I'm going to mix up the JB weld, and we'll be right back. Alright, I'm in back of the camera right now, but I don't know if you can see that. I had taken a piece of plastic that I just bought for a right angle drill, and I was able to curve the plastic around the existing groove. So on the housing itself here, there's a very small groove that the O-ring sits inside. So the plastic right now is sitting in that groove, and I kind of taped it to use that as a mold as I put the JB weld in. So you just mix up the JB weld now. This stuff works great. I've used it before on several projects, and it's the best thing before welding. And since I don't have a welder, this is what I have to do. So I used it on this part of the, where my drive shaft goes in for the U-joint. I've JB welded this, and I don't know if you can see that, but right here, this was also, water had gotten in here, and I guess it corroded it, so I built up the wall there with JB weld. Anyway, so hopefully this will go on pretty smooth. I'm going to do it in steps. I don't try to do it all in one shot, because I don't think it's as good to try to put a whole big lump in there at one time. So here we go. And of course I had used my Dremel. I don't know if you can see that, but I used my Dremel. I ground out all the old corrosion. There's a lot of salt in there. Got all that out. Vacuumed it, wiped it down with some acetone, and here you are with me now. So trying to use that plastic as a guide so I can try to build up the side where the O-ring goes in. And there was one spot right there that really got corroded, so I don't know what's that reason, but I'm trying to get this back to where it should be. Okay, mic back, and I left this on so you can see it. I used a piece of plastic that came from a part that I bought, right angle drill connection, and you can see where the PB weld I put back on over the first coat. Actually, I think this is my third coat to bring up the wall a little bit. And I don't know if you can see it, but I'll show it to you this way. There's an outer ring and an inner where the O-ring fits inside. So that's what I was trying to do right here. You can see I built it up a little bit on this side too. And then using my Dremel, I cut back out the space between the two rings. Was it absolutely necessary? Probably not, but I had it apart. And I figured, what the heck, let me just do it. So let's see how hard it is for me to get this apart now. Fortunately, make sure it's still in the same place so you can see it. Yeah, you can see that. Alright, so sorry. Okay, so we put that up this way so you can see that. Yeah, that's a pretty good shot of it. And I'll zoom in a little bit more so you can see right here where I have the new JB Weld, and over here, and that's the groove that I got to cut out. So, alright, I don't know if you're going to be able to hear this over the vacuum, but I got my Dremel set up with a rotary sander just to level it off. Then I'll come back in with the very small fine tooth milling blade. So, alright, I got to turn the vacuum on. Boy, it helps if you plug it in, doesn't it? Alright. Inside ridge right here, and you can see that there's those two rings. Just letting the Dremel do the work. Not putting really any downward pressure on it. Alright, so I got out the JB Weld, and just to give you an idea if you can see it, I ground out the groove again. I'm going to test fit it with the O-ring. I'll leave that sort of like that. And I got one little spot that's pinching it right here. I got to grind that out a little bit more. So let me make sure you're seeing that. I'll show you how I'm doing that. Yeah, that's a pretty good. Okay, so got a very fine point on the Dremel, and I've been using two hands to guide it. Otherwise, I move too much. Just nice and slow and steady. I think that'll do it. It's a little pinched right in that spot, but do a test fit with the motor. Should be good to go. Fits right in there. And it's only held on with these two little screws, I mean nuts. 1032s I think they are. Okay, so I'm done with this. I'm not gonna, the inner wall's a little corroded, but I'm not gonna go all the way. I'm gonna smooth this out a little bit. Maybe I'll paint this section. I was thinking about painting the whole thing, but this is a aluminum magnesium mix, and I could probably do it. I haven't really thought through it, because wrapping the line around this part, eventually you know the paint's going to wear off, so I got to put a little more thought into it. Anyway, the next part, I'm going to be putting it back together. We'll go through that and put this good AFD half-inch windlass back where it belongs. Okay, we'll see you in a little bit. Sorry about that. You see my bench has got all the parts all over the place. They're all here, but sometimes they can get a little messy, which is not good. So this is the bow of the boat, so I'm going to face the label inside. Here's the small O-ring. That's going to sit right over that one. If you can see it, the O-ring goes around there. And this one is going to sit right here. JB Weld, boy, what a lifesaver that stuff can be. It's popping out a little bit on this one side where the inner wall is gone. So I tucked it in there as best I could. The weight of the motor should hold it down. Yep. Okay. Got the lock washers here. Alright, I put the motor back on, but then I took it back off. When I put the motor in, I had greased the shaft going through here in the pump housing, and I'm not sure, maybe I put too much grease on or not, but I took some of the grease out, I took the motor off, I put the shaft back in, and made sure it was all the way down, that it was seated all the way down. I put back in the Allen key. I'm going to take that back out. I'm going to use a little bit of blue Loctite on it. And when I was holding the shaft down, then I was able to put the motor back in. This was a little bit too high for some reason, so when I was putting the cover back on to test fit it, you can see there's a little hole right here for the top of the shaft. And right in this corner it was lifted up a little bit, so I took it apart, held it down, put the motor back in, tightened it nice and slow while I was holding this down to make sure that it was seated properly, and we're good to go. Now I got to put the gear set back in. First I got a silicone, put the two gear sets back in. There's a part here that keeps the rope spinning around. I'll put that back in, and then we'll be good to go. And I keep saying I'm trying not to, but anyway, that's it now for tonight. I'm a little tired. I'm going to come back, finish this tomorrow. Alright, I just thought I'd bring that little tip in about putting the shaft in before putting the motor back in. That's what worked for me. Okay, according to the good manual and the guys at Good, you're supposed to coat this whole thing with silicone before you put it back together. So I'm going to do that now. I already cleaned it with acetone. I scraped off all the old silicone. And as I said earlier, you have to make sure all the old silicone is off, because silicone doesn't stick to silicone. So I'm just cleaning it again right now because I put the cover on and there was a little bit of residual oil on there. So, and I cleaned it in here real good. And just remember, this is the water side, or the line side, and this is where the oil bath is. So I cut a very narrow hole on my tip just to make sure I get a thin bead. I don't want to get it all sloppy, so let's do this very slowly. Just making sure I got it everywhere. No spots missed. A little bit more right here. Now when I took it apart, there was some silicone in the holes, but I'm not going to put silicone back in the holes. The manual says you can coat the screws with grease, and I'm going to put a little bit right under the heads when I screw down the cover. Now I'm just checking we got silicone everywhere. It's a very thin area to try to stick it in. And I'm just going to go along the inside just to make sure I don't get too much squeeze out where the oil's supposed to go. Here's messy stuff, right? Okay. Next up is to put this piece, whatever they call it, goes inside here, which I'm going to have to put the gear assembly in and this together at the same time. So let's do that. Finding that hole doesn't seem to be it's going to be that easy. Okay, I'm putting a little grease on the screw. Be like hit a mess trying to find it. Oh, I guess I have to unscrew it from my bench here, so I can look underneath. So that'll make it a little bit easier, right? Getting the silicone all over my fingers. Okay, you take just a touch of silicone. Now I'm not going to make this super tight because the challenge is going to make it a little loose. This bolt goes in the upper cover, so you have to be dead on when you put it in. I don't know really how it's set like that to do that, but that's the way it is. Alright, well, we got that back in. We'll put this back. Put my screw back in. Alright, and you know, this is my first time doing this. I'm not going to say I'm an expert at it at all, but this is what I'm working on. So now I'm going to just give a little oil on this one gear. Now I did notice on this side right here, this is like a carrier bearing, and when you rotate the gears, that part seems to be stationary, and I did put silicone underneath. I don't think it's supposed to spin, and the other reason is that even though this cover, this is the clutch cover, goes over that and you do silicone this, I didn't want any moisture coming up through the line or the bow and coming back into the clutch cover. So today's Saturday and I didn't have a chance to call Good and ask them, but that's what I'm going to do. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but okay, the next part is to get the other gear assembly in. I want to make sure I didn't mess up my silicone, because I got my hands on it when I was doing it. Okay, where are we? Okay, next gear set. These were the old bearings. I forgot to order bearings, but it's too late now. I'm putting it back together. I could always take it apart again. And I am going to just give this a good clean wipe down again. Even though I had cleaned it before. Make sure there's no dirt on it. So I'm just cleaning the gear assembly, and I am going to put a few drops of oil in the bearings. I'm just letting the excess drip off, because I have to put this on this side and play around with this gear set to get it to go in. I got it in backwards. That didn't help. Okay, got the squeeze out on the silicone, and just like I hoped, it's squeezed out on the outside, so I'm just going to give that a quick wipe. Just being really careful that I don't contaminate it with silicone or anything, so making sure I don't have anything on here. I'll put the silicone on the cover versus over here, because it's a little tough to do it over here. Okay, I am going to put a little oil on top of the gears. And I'll fill the rest when I have the cover closed up. Okay, so now we need to silicone the top half of these journals. Again, I'm just going to give it another clean wipe. I had also put some oil inside that hole. That hole is the carrier for that shaft. So I really don't like using silicone. It's very, very messy. So and I think I'm good everywhere else. I'm going to put a little more oil in. The fill is over here. When I had no oil in it, I can move it any direction I wanted without having to worry about it spilling. But now I'll have to keep it vertical all the time so I don't accidentally spill oil anywhere. Okay, here we go. I guess I'll have to do this one from underneath again. Let me just tighten that Allen key up a little bit. Yeah, that's better. I need a little stiff so I know where it is. Okay, I guess I have to unscrew this again. Get my screw ready with some grease. That does it. If you hold it from underneath, you can rotate it back and forth to get it in the proper spot. Okay, again I'm going to take a tiny bit of silicone. I'm not really sure you have to do this, but it says it in the manual, so I do whatever the manual says. Just going to shove some silicone in around that hole. And tighten that other one up. Okay, good to go. Alright, so the rest now is just putting back on all the bolts. There's a slew of them. They're all the same size. I'm not sure what size they are, but what I ended up doing is also I bought some 6 gauge, I'll show it to you in a second, according to the manual, the way this should have been wired is 6-gauge wire all the way from the battery with a 60 amp fuse. And what Formula did back in '88 was they used two 10-gauge wires. I guess they thought they'd split the voltage draw, but according to Good, they were having a lot of motor failures. So what I decided to do is I didn't wire it from the battery yet with the new 6-gauge wire, but what I did buy is 6-gauge wire to go between the two solenoids. So my plan is to take the two 10-gauge hot leads and the two 10-gauge negative leads, put those both on the same terminal coming from and back to the battery, and then I bought some 6-gauge wire to jump the two solenoid terminals from the two 10-gauge over to the second solenoid terminal. Sorry about that. I was drifting off there for a second. I got to run up to the school. My daughter's got some sort of there's a football game later, so in any event, so I'm trying to think of that at the same time. So I'm just hoping that it'll increase the current flow. So I did speak to Good on Friday. They thought it was fine. And I'll tell you, they're one of the better companies out there. They still have great customer service. It's like a family-run company. They're willing to get on the phone with you. I can't stand companies now that all they're interested in doing is selling a new product. You know, as much as it's always nice to sell new stuff, it goes to show when a company builds something that's, and I'm not getting paid for this, I'm not sponsoring it, but I can tell a good company from a bad one just from their customer service. If they're willing to get on the phone and spend time with you, telling you how to do stuff, you know they're a good company. I can't tell you how many companies I get on the phone with that just don't want to help you. I called GE once. I had a dishwasher with a leak. They wouldn't tell me if I could fix it or not. All they wanted to tell me is go buy a new dishwasher. Now what does that tell you about a company? They're not really interested in support, but they're interested in sales. I understand that. But you got to stand behind your product. It can't all be about, you know, planned obsolescence. Now I don't know how tight these are supposed to be, but I'm making them tight enough. That's my, you know, I see the glue, the squeeze out from the silicone. And the one thing about when you use silicone, you don't want to squeeze it to death. It's gotta, you gotta give it a chance to harden up and form a skin. And then once the silicone is hard, that's when you give it a little bit of extra tightening down so that it does its job. So again, I'm just wiping off the excess. Got a nice squeeze out on both sides. Does make a mess though, silicone. That's why I have my roll of paper towels down here with me. Tell you, I go through so many paper towels doing this stuff. I think it's too much on there. What do you think? I don't want it so much where it squeezes out it gets into the clutch mechanism. I bought this cover because I couldn't get the two screws out. And there's two pins, one on this side, one on that side with springs. So Good sold me a new one. All the parts that I ordered came out with shipping and sales tax to $155. Yours, you know, you may not need the same parts, but that's what I ordered. Okay, we bumbled. Got the cover upside down. I'll show you that just so you can see what I did. There's a drain hole. And let me just give the clutch another wipe because I want to make sure I didn't get any silicone on that. I had re-greased in here. Sorry, I had re-greased in there by pulling the clutch mechanism back and forth. I got lucky, look at that. Now I'm not putting silicone on these two holes, these two screws, because sometimes you got to get that clutch cover off, and I don't want to make it where I can't. So you can see the squeeze out. I'm not going crazy tightening it down. I'm going to let that sit for a little while, then I'll come back and tighten it down the rest of the way. Right now I'll wipe out the squeeze out. And then we'll tighten the screws for the pins. Okay, well that's the windlass put back together. Hey guys, it's Mike back with the 1988 F29 Formula PC, finishing up with the windlass project. So let me show you what we got going here. I'm just going to change the camera around, so just hold on one second. So this is the good AFD windlass, half inch. I just lowered it back into the original hole just to give it a test. Because it was filled with oil, I didn't want to test it inside in case it tipped over. So anyway, I'm going to bring you inside the boat and show you what we did with the wiring. Hold on one second. Alright, so I'm back inside the boat, and I just have this temporarily wired up. And I'm just going to lay it down here so you can see it. Remember earlier I said I was going to get the light over here a little bit better. See if you can see that. That's better. Okay. So I got to take a little bit of electrical tape off because right now the wire is a little tight, but I have one power lead coming to this one, the other one coming to this one. The only reason I did that is because I couldn't get the ground wires on over here because the wire was so short coming out of the loom. But I ran this 6-gauge wire around in a loop. So these are both the hot leads coming from the switch. Again, good recommended. These should have been 6-gauge right from the battery. So I did it with took the two 10-gauge wires and put it on both power poles on the new solenoids. This is the ground. So I got both grounds coming on the return back to the battery. This is the ground making a loop over here, and another ground coming here on the 6-gauge. So these I made up in the earlier video and looped them around, return back to the battery. The two orange leads are from the switch. One is for up, one is for down. I have to confirm which one is up and which one is down because on the wiring diagram it's a little confusing. If it's not right, then you just reverse the two contacts. You put that one over here and this one over there. Not a big deal. So I'm not putting the windlass in permanently right now because I want to seal the valve pulpit. There's a leak. All these formulas had a leak coming through the valve pulpits. And while I have the windlass off, I believe I'm going to take off the valve pulpit and recore it and then seal it. But so that's the wiring. It kind of looks like a mess, but it won't. It'll be mounted up like that inside the locker. All right, we're back. Had to make some room on my memory card. But anyway, this is the important test. Here we go. That's up, down. I don't have any line on the windlass right now, but I'm just happy that it's working. We'll be putting it back together. It came with the new gasket, and they do recommend that you use some sort of polysulfide caulking to seal both sides of the gasket as well. But that valve pulpit really needs to be rebuilt, so we'll do that over the winter. All right, so I'm going to put this together, tie it up with the rest of the windlass video, and please subscribe. Any comments you have, please write them below, and please subscribe to more YouTube videos on the F29 Formula PC. Thank you, and have a great day, guys.